There are three types of chord progressions. The first is progressions that stay in the same key. It makes them loopable and catchy. Then you've got chord progressions that change keys, but they do it in a sudden way. Usually, it's to give more energy to the last chorus of the song by going to a higher key. It's a jarring change, right? So the third way is chord progressions that change keys, but they do that in a smooth, connected way, seamlessly, where you don't really realize that we've changed keys. Something like this. Right? So I started in the key of E minor and I landed on the key of D minor at the end, and it was more smooth and connected. So this is what we're gonna learn to do in this lesson, how to do seamless key changes in your chord progressions. Hey, my name is Antoine for my electric guitar composing channel, where I help electric guitar players compose full sounding music on guitar from home. And I realized that over the years, I have barely even mentioned on my channel that I am in a band. I am in a world-class progressive rock band called Mystery and have been over the past decade. And we were preparing for a couple shows that are coming in a few weeks. And I wanted to analyze one of our songs because it has a lot of key changes, but it happens so smoothly that you barely even realize it. The song is called Till the Truth Comes Out, and it goes like this.
Love is that sun that we light. You ignore the tears they cry. She begins to doubt all we've learned as a child. Still he stands there by her side. Keep the dream alive. The more you love, the less you know. You think you understand until the truth is coming out.
So let's analyze what's happening here. We start in the key of E minor with a beautiful voicing of an E minor add 9, right? So I play the E bass note and then the open strings, but I add the ninth right here on the 4th fret of the 4th string for a beautiful voicing. And then we just change the bass note from E to D, which makes a D major chord, but with an add 9, add 11, add 13. That's a mouthful, so that's what I call usually a polychord. So we just have a D major triad at the bottom and an E minor triad at the top. Right? So it's a D major and an E minor, a polychord. So basically, it just establishes that the key is E minor. We play the root chord and then the flat 7, root chord, flat 7. And then that's where we're going to change keys after. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of pivot chords. Pivot chords are chords that are in both keys, the previous keys and the previous key and the key that you want to get to, and you're going to use it as a middle ground between both keys before you transition, and that's going to do it in a smooth way. So then after the E minor and D chords, we get to the chord C. And that's going to be our pivot chord because it's the flat 6 chord in our key of E minor. But it's also the flat 7 chord in our key of D minor, which we want to get to. Right? So we're going to use it as a pivot chord because it's in both keys. So we play the chord C, then we have a passing chord, which is a G on a bass of B. It's almost there just to, as a passing chord, but to re-emphasize the fact that C is our pivot chord because it's a chord, it's kind of its own 5 chord of the C chord, right? And then we go to the chord B flat. And that makes sense because now the key that we're in is the key of D minor, and that's the flat 6 chord. And then we go to A major, which is the 5 chord that goes to D minor, right? It's very common in a minor key that you get the 5 chord as a major chord. Instead of naturally, it's supposed to be a minor chord. But it's very common to get a major chord to give it more attraction, more tension, so that we can resolve to the root chord, right? So we use C as the pivot chord, and then eventually we have kind of a cadence to really emphasize that D minor is the new key, right? And then we play an F on the bass of C, and the B flat once again. And then B flat is a pivot chord in itself because it's going to be the launching point for our new key, which is going to be F. In the chorus, that's the key of F, right? So B flat is the flat 6 chord in the key of D minor, but it's also the 4 chord in the key of F. Right? So we're going to do just that. We're going to use it to launch ourselves into the key of F, which is the chorus. The more you less you know, you think you understand, until the truth is coming out. So now we are in the key of F. We have the root chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, and then we have a borrowed chord, which is D flat. It's the flat 6. It's not in the key of F, but it's just a temporary chord that we borrow to the parallel minor key. So in the key of F minor, we get the flat 6 chord, D flat. And in the key of F major, it's supposed to be, the 6th chord is supposed to be D minor, right? So we use the chord D flat as a temporary color before we come back to our root chord of F and the key of F in general, right? So when you add a chord that's outside the key, you always have 2 choices. Use it as a temporary color to come back to the key you were in, or use it as a launching point to change key and to go elsewhere, right? So we have both examples in this chord progression. We have, for example, the G chord on a bass of C, that we could use it to stay in the key of E minor, which was the first key, right? But instead, we used it as a launching point to do something else and go elsewhere, right? As in this case, the D flat chord was just a temporary color so that we could come back on the key of F. And guess what? The F chord is also a pivot chord, right? It's the root chord in my key of F, but it's also the Neapolitan chord in the key of E minor so that we can come back on the verse. What is a Neapolitan chord? It's the flat 2 chord. Because the flat 2 chord has kind of the same kind of attraction than the 5 chord. Right? The 5 chord attracts a lot the root chord, but the flat 2 chord, which we also call the Neapolitan chord, has the same kind of attraction, just a little darker, right? So it's always the chord that's 1 semitone higher than the root chord, and it's a major chord. And we use that a lot in rock and metal, right? So to have the F chord that goes back to makes perfect sense, right? So we cycle through three different kinds of keys, and we use a lot of pivot chords to do that, right? And why it works and why it's super smooth, it's because it can be explained by the circle of fifths. I have not talked about a lot the circle of fifths on my channel over the years, but it's super helpful here. Take a look at this. So this is the circle of fifth, right? On the top, we have the major keys, the key of C, G, D, A, and in the middle, we have the minor keys as well, right? So it's all moving with fifth intervals, C, G, D, A, and so on, right? It's all a fifth. So the goal to make smooth connected key changes in your chord progressions is to never move one or two notches away, whether it's forward or backward from where you were. So if we consider that we are in the key of C, then I can move to the key of G or D, and we're going to have more occasions where we can find common chords between both keys that we can use as pivot chords and do it super smoothly, right? And same if we go backwards. So that's what happened in our song right here. We were in the key of E minor, and then we went to the key of D minor, which is two notches backwards right here. So we still had a few chords that we could use as pivot chords. Then we changed from D minor to F. And essentially, it's relative keys, right? They share exactly the same 7 notes, but it's just the center of attraction that's different. This one, the root chord is D minor, and this one is F. And then we went from F back to E minor, which once again, it's like 2 notches. So if you go farther than that, it's going to be super distant keys. And first of all, you won't have probably chords that you can use as a pivot chord that's shared between both keys, and it's going to be a jarring change, right? Let's say we go from E minor to A flat major, right? So let's say I'm in the key of E minor, and I want to go to the key of A flat, right? It was just jumping at you, a jarring change, because it's so far. It's so far from where we were, right? So if you move 2 notches up or down the circle of fifths, it's always going to be smooth. And if you really want to go super distant, then you need to take your time more. You need to travel from one key to the next, to the next, to the next, to eventually go where you want, right? So if I start on E minor, I can go from E minor, then to D minor, then to E flat, and then E flat is going to be super close to my key of A flat that I want to get to, for example. So if I play the same progression that we did in the song example from my band Mystery. So now I'm going to the key of D minor. And then I could use the B flat chord as a pivot chord because it's the flat 6 chord in the key of D minor, but it's also the 5 chord in the key of E flat, right? So I could do. Right? So now I'm in the key of E flat, which is super close to A flat, right? So if I go fast, right? So it was much smoother because I came from E minor, D minor, and then E flat, and then A flat, instead of going from, which is like, it's too distant, right? So that's the way you can change keys smoothly in your songs, to use pivot chords. What I love about music is that it's a temporal art form. It only exists through time. Unlike paintings, or sculpture, which is a static form of art, you can do with music a retrospective analysis of what's happened in the past and recontextualize it. So when you hear a pivot chord, you don't know yet that it's going to be a pivot chord that's going to launch you into a new key. It's only after hearing what's happened in the future that you can go back in the past and make sense of something that you didn't know was going to happen, right? So that's what I find fascinating about music. If you want to get more help with your chord progressions, go check out my free mini course on spread triad chords. It's the first link in the description box. I'm going to show you super useful chords that are called spread triads. I'm going to show them to you in major, minor, diminished, suspended chords, and how to create chord progressions with them in any key. It's super valuable. It's a 45 minutes free course. It's for free, so why not go click on the first link in the description box and enroll. It's my gift to you for watching my video until the end. And of course, if you found this content super helpful, subscribe to my channel for more and like this video and comment for the algorithm. It helps a lot to spread this video to more people, and of course you can share it if you want. See you on my next video. Until next time, au revoir.